Hello, Jeanne Martin.
Hi everybody at home.
And Frank Dello Stritto, and we're discussing Hitchcock.
Yes, tomorrow's film is Stage Fright, 1950. And it occurred to me when you told me about this movie that you show a lot of movies from the late 40s and early 50s. And the reason they're in the public domain is that, you know, the old system in Hollywood was collapsing. A new system hadn't been built up yet.
Really?
And the big studios didn't call the shots anymore, or pretty soon they wouldn't anymore. The world was changing. And Hitchcock had been in Hollywood for all of the 1940s, and after the war, late in the 40s, he went back to England to make some movies because you could get financing there, and it was much cheaper to make movies there. But it was kind of a quiet period for him. He made his classics in the 30s, 39 Steps, and then the 40s with Rebecca and Lifeboat, and my favorite Hitchcock film is Notorious, 1946. And then he really kind of falls off the radar for a couple of years, but he's still making movies. But I don't think he's figured out how to exist in the new system yet. And one of those movies is Stage Fright. Now, I'm not going to tell you anything about the plot for two reasons. One is it's not a complicated plot when you watch it, but when you try to explain it to somebody, you're tripping over yourself. This guy went here, that guy did this. You know, nobody can make any sense of it. But it's not that way. The movie is quite easy to follow. And the second reason it's hard for me to talk about the movie without giving away something that is a true mystery. So, nothing on the plot. It involves a murder, and it involves a whodunit. And typical of Hitchcock, almost all of his movies have someone who's accused of a crime they haven't committed, and how are they going to get out of it? That's the central theme of his. That's the theme of his movies. The recurring plot element is the innocently accused person. And the neat thing about this movie is you start having doubts real early whether this person is really innocent or not. Most of the Hitchcock movies, the innocent is known to be innocent, and you're rooting for him. This one is a darker film in that sense. But when you mention the Hitchcock canon, you don't often hear Stage Fright mentioned.
And why is that?
It is, he when you make similar plots for 30 years, the best ones kind of overshadow the other ones. There are things different about this. There's a real tension between the two leading actresses, Marlene Dietrich and Jane Wyman, who apparently did not get along on the set, but they didn't get along. They didn't care for much of each other. And Marlene Dietrich later on, I don't know if it was I don't know if she wrote an autobiography, but a biography of her by her daughter, I think, basically said she didn't care for Jane Wyman, and you can pick up a little of that when you watch this.
Well, when you watch Myra Breckinridge, and you know that Raquel Welch and Mae West, two, sex symbols, if you will, but Mae in her 80s at that point, off screen it said that they really were like two cats fighting. But on screen, the chemistry between them is amazing. How did Jane and Dietrich fare on this, Wyman?
I think it fared fine. Now, they don't really have that, most of the time Jane Wyman's character is deceiving Marlene Dietrich's character, and that works.
Okay. Because they hate each other.
Nothing like pure hatred to make a screen come to life.
Good old-fashioned hatred. How refreshing. The Klingon to Captain Kirk.
Anyway, but this is a good movie, but Hitchcock really hits his stride again shortly after this with Strangers on a Train, and then really hits it a couple of years later, 1954, with Dial M for Murder, and that starts the procession of his classic late 1950s.
I'm sorry, Frank, but if I had produced a movie with Marlene Dietrich and Jane Wyman, it would be the high point of my career. And you're basically saying this guy's hitting his stride with other films. I mean, he's an amazing man, isn't he?
Oh yeah, he was,
and I met him.
You met him?
Yep.
I met him. God bless you.
Did you know that I met him?
I did not. You must have been a child.
I was about 18. I have photographic evidence. I published a little magazine called Var Ulven, Norwegian for werewolf. So he was at the old SAC 57, which was where the famous Coconut Grove fire was. Okay? And there's a plaque there on the street, Coconut Grove Fire. So you go up about another 100 feet, actually, take a left, and there was the SAC 57 Theater, which is now another hotel. And Hitchcock was there for Frenzy. So it had to be 72?
Frenzy is 72, that's right.
So I was 18 years old. And I got photos of him. And I remember to this day, because it's Alfred Hitchcock, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There's a baby. And he goes, "We must put a wig on the baby's head." Then he autographs for me, which is his profile. And I have that in the magazine. And the photos I took of the cake and Hitchcock and probably the baby.
Wow.
"We must put a wig on the baby's head." He just looks up from his autographs and then goes back to autographing.
He was a strange man.
He was great. But that's my encounter with Alfred. I photographed Alfred Hitchcock, Frank.
Okay,
Wow.
well, I've seen some of his movies. That's as close as I can get.
Me too. But I have seen him interviewed, and he is kind of a strange guy.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
he's very strange.
Yeah.
Have you ever met Billy Mumy, the child actor, who's no longer a child, but he was a child actor in the 50s and 60s?
And what was he in the Munsters?
No, that's Eddie Munster. That's Butch Patrick.
Oh, yeah, Butch Patrick we've interviewed, but we haven't got Billy Mumy yet on Visual Radio.
Well, if you ever get him on, you ask him about Alfred Hitchcock, because he was a child star. He was like, less than 10. And he was making an Alfred Hitchcock Presents or an Alfred Hitchcock show mystery, half-hour show. And being a kid, he wasn't exactly the disciplined actor that Hitchcock wanted. And Hitchcock went up to him and said, "If you don't stand in your spot, I will nail your feet to the wall, to the floor until the blood runs like milk." And Billy Mumy tells the story of how terrified he was at that, but that's the effect Hitchcock wanted.
Yeah,
So he was a bit of a strange man, I guess.
and he didn't like to work with actors. In one of the interviews, they said.
Well, no, he wanted to, as far as Janet Leigh goes, right? And he wanted to have an affair with her, I think.
Well, there's the stories. He had this weakness for young blondes, and I guess the one you have to get on is Tippi Hedren, who was in Marnie and the Birds, and she tells, well, as much as she's a rather discreet woman, but she tells this guy had problems with her, and that's why she basically turned her back on him.
But didn't he blacklist Janet Leigh, Janet Leigh? Psycho, right?
I don't know that story.
One of them was allegedly blacklisted by Alfred Hitchcock. He was a married man, and he had, like you said, the penchant for young blondes.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to trash the guy because I don't know the whole story.
I met him. I love him.
Hedren had problems with him, and after her second film with him, Marnie, she kind of drops off the map. Now, she might have only been on the map because he liked putting her in movies. She was, I don't think she was any great talent, but she
wasn't bad though.
Had her fallout with him.
She wasn't a bad actress. I thought that in The Birds, at least, she was believable.
Mm-hmm. Oh, The Birds was scary.
It's easy to give a good performance if the movie is built around you. I mean, the director works for you and all that. The people I admire are the character actors who are basically called in for a day or two.
Yep.
And somehow carve out great performances in nothing that they have any creative control over. They handed a script and they're expected to say their lines.
Yeah, it's like grace under pressure.
Yes, and whether I'm, like a lot of these, like Seinfeld is one of my favorite shows of all time. And one of the reasons it's the favorite is there's actors come in, and a lot of them are stand-up comedians who aren't really actors, and they come in and they create these characters, and it's one thing doing it in a movie, but usually a TV show is filmed in a matter of a couple of days, and they don't have any time to develop anything. They have to do it all themselves. And I'm a big Dello Lugosi fan, and he walked into these sets, and there was nothing for him to work with, and somehow he usually carved out a performance you couldn't forget. So I admire that. And actually, there's one of those actors in this movie, Alistair Sim, who is one of the grand old British actors. And when he had a starring role, he could really chew it alive. And he's very effective in this movie. And he's the kind of guy who's, when he stared at you, you knew it.
When Jeannie stares at you, you know it. She was in the military. You got great. She's got psychologist eyes.
Well, as I tell you, Joe, I never watch your show because the one time I did, I thought I sound like an idiot, and I'm too self-conscious for the next couple of shows, and those were my worst shows with you. So now I don't pay attention to it. So.
Now Anthony, who programs our movies, thinks you're great. So he just thinks you're terrific.
Yeah, but believe me, if I watch the show every week, or if I watch what you post on YouTube, and first of all, let me thank you for all the YouTube credits I have. 99% of them are your show.
No, but what's great is
it's them, I'd say, nope, I can't do that. And I either change or I wouldn't do it. So I appreciate Anthony's fandom, but I'm not going to watch myself.
It's a great library, Frank. Hundreds of years from now, people will be listening to Frank Dello Stritto. I bet you will hit tens of millions of hits, but it will be 200 years from now.
Yes,
but they're going to go like, wow, this is great.
Frank, I love...
If word gets out that you met Alfred Hitchcock, there'll be a religion founded in your honor.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, Frank, I love the movies of the 30s and the 40s. That time period is unbelievable. I mean, the topics they... I watch TCM?
Movie channel, TMC.
Yeah, not AMC, because that's
TMC,
different. Yeah,
movie channel, Ted
it's
Turner, right?
unbelievable. They show all the 30s and 40s movies. They're
Because he
phenomenal.
owns them, right, Frank?
I don't know if he owns every movie he shows. In fact, I know he doesn't own every movie he shows, but he bought the MGM library, so he had as much of the MGM library he could buy, and I know he has control over those. When he shows a Universal horror movie, I don't think he has any ownership in them. I think they're just leasing a film the same as you and I would.
Oh, good.
Yes,
Okay.
he owns a lot of movies, and that's his staple. When he has a Halloween special or a holiday special, they show a lot of movies that he doesn't own. It's a great station, and I love Robert Osborne. And
Yes, I love him too. And
quite frankly, on a weeknight when I get home, I know I'm not going to last through a whole movie, but I'll tune in to hear his introductions, and I always learn something. And I always keep an eye on him, because when he's talking about horror movies, I like to hear what he's saying. I usually don't agree with it, but everybody's got their opinions.
Now, we've digressed from stage fright, but there were 2 points I wanted to make. One you brought up was the Alfred Hitchcock TV show, which is on now. I think it's on one of those, not AMC, but one of those channels in the 200s. Every night you can see Alfred Hitchcock shows, and they've got all these famous people starring in them. So he did keep these plot things going. It's kind of like in the 30s and 40s, he had the serial movie, right? And then he turned it into a shorter TV show.
Yeah, when you think about it, this was a major Hollywood director. And in the late 50s, he was not in decline. I mean, that's when Vertigo and Rear Window and North by Northwest came out, and Psycho came out, all during the time that he had an active TV show. And some of the episodes he was basically did the introductions for, and not much more. But a lot of the episodes he directed them. He had a real hand in them.
Whoa!
And you don't. When have we seen that otherwise? I mean, you don't have that, a major director actually having a major hit on television. And that show was on for a long time. Let's see, I think the Hitchcock show came on in 55, and I think the half-hour show ended in 61, and then I think it came back for an hour-long show. And it's one of the few shows that successfully transitioned from a half-hour to an hour. God knows Twilight Zone didn't do it. And it lasted another 4. I'm looking up now. I think it lasted another 4 seasons as a 1-hour show. So I'll make a statement. It may not be true, but it is. It may be the most successful half-hour show that transformed itself into a 1-hour show.
Now that's interesting, because we're the most successful 1-hour public access show that never had a 30-minute show.
really,
Okay, but when times get tough, you may have to retreat there.
True words were never spoken. Anyway, this has been a lot of fun. Stage Fright is going to be on Friday night here, June 8th at 9 p.m. We're talking Hitchcock. We're talking how Frank Dello Stritto's contemporaneous reviews, contemporaneous for this century, will be appreciated thousands of years from now in
That's
little
right.
time capsules on planet Mars. You know.
Well, I don't know.
Well, see, I think something's happening, Frank. I think back in the 60s when I met Hitchcock, I had, a still camera.
Mm-hmm.
Not the video I have now when I taped Bobby Hebb and, Jodie Foster. So we're transitioning into this whole other cyber world where this stuff goes up there. I think Google has everything. Even stuff they say is deleted, come on. Mm-hmm. They have got a library of the world. They're creating a second Library of Congress.
Mm-hmm.
But let me ask you, Joe, on the outside chance my stuff survives.
Yep.
In 100 years, won't there be so damn much on the internet that nobody will be able to find anything except by accident?
No, I think people are already hunting the nooks and the crannies of the internet. Do you know what BitTorrent is?
BitTorrent? No.
BIT, capital T, ORRENT. BitTorrent on the internet. These are the nooks and crannies. It's file sharing, and people are finding elegant Ed Sullivan shows that aren't out yet. And these fans have space on their own home computers and servers, and they share them. So I've been to a film director's house where he has shown me stuff that's been missing in action for decades. And these fans have it on BitTorrent. So they're in nooks and crannies on the internet. When you've got 6.5 billion people on a planet, and more than half of them tune into the internet, Frank, they are gold digging every day.
All right, so somebody will find us in 100 years and say, gee, those guys really knew what they were doing.
Well, just the fact that we've interviewed about 700 guests here. I've interviewed over 1,000 people between the magazine, the radio show, and the TV show. We have content. And somewhere in that content, you know, I went to interview John Sebastian of the Love and Spoonful. Mm-hmm. He didn't want to grant an interview. He was in cranky mood, whatever he was in that day. But I got Fritz Richmond. Fritz Richmond's an important Boston figure and international figure, playing washboard and all sorts of eclectic stuff. Fritz passed away a few years back. I have a wonderful 15-minute interview with Fritz Richmond, which to me is very, very valuable. And to the people out there that know of him and his importance, he did a lot of session work for a lot of musicians. So this show has captured fly on the wall. We've got an hour with Barbara Harris of the Toys in New York at a restaurant. And a friend of mine said, the beauty of your show is it's real reality TV. You're talking to legends at a dinner table. And it's really true. That's why this show is popular. And I think what we're doing, Frank, is going to be very popular down the road.
All right.
Because people love movies.
Joe, you've made me an immortal.
All right, now there's a second point I wanted to make about movies. You said about these copyrights and how the movies abandon them. Isn't it intriguing how David Bowie and the Rolling Stones moved their copyrights from one major company to another, getting millions of dollars? They understand the value. I can't believe that these film directors did not understand the value of even Hitchcock, his own personal library.
Well, I mean, movies can fall into the public domain for a whole variety of reasons. I don't know if he owned this movie. I don't know. Or for instance, he might have sold his ownership in the movie.
Okay.
Like David O. Selznick made Gone with the Wind, but he sold his ownership early on. So when when all the revivals and the DVDs and all that, neither Selznick nor his estate got a dime off that because he had sold it. So you gotta track these things or whatever. So I don't know why this movie fell into the public domain. But I mean, there was a time when you had to renew copyrights, and that cost money. And there wasn't until the age of TV. A movie after its initial release was not considered a real asset. I mean, some movies would be re-released and et cetera. But when it came up time to renew their copyrights, the businessmen in charge had to say, "Is this a good business decision? I don't know how much it costs to renew a copyright. $1,000. Do I want to spend $1,000?
No, it would always be the same. $25.
Yeah,
or $10, or
whatever it is. But then if you suppose you're Ted Turner 50 years ago, and all of a sudden 300 movies come up for renewal the same day, and you're a little short of cash that day.
Well, 300 movies times $10, even for $3,000 in those days. I'm sorry. You have made investments of millions of dollars in those days, which is huge.
Yeah, but if you talk to independent producers that used to work with the major studios could be easily negotiated out of their residual rights because they didn't see any great value to it.
Wow.
And that is something else that's happening about 1950, because television is growing, and all of a sudden these films that are sitting in the vault, and by the way, in addition to the renewal fee, it costs money to preserve a film. These things have to be kept in the right temperatures and all that, which is why some films have survived, but just barely. And somebody has to bear that expense. But then television comes along, and all of a sudden these studios are seeing their warehouses become their libraries. For instance, Columbia Pictures realized early on that movies would have a second life in television. They set up screen gems, and they bought the rights to the Universal horror movies. So when the Universal horror movies came on in the 1950s, they weren't released by Universal. They were released by Columbia. And then when that contract ran out, Universal snapped them all back. So
they realized.
no interest in renewing. But when the first big surge in the movies that the classic horror movies that I love came not from the company that made them, but the company that leased them. And Richard, we mentioned Richard Gordon on this program once. He's an independent producer that passed away about a year ago. And one of the reasons he got out of independent production as part of his negotiation was always to get the residual rights to the film. And he said that, as the years went on, he was still being able to do it in the 60s, but as the 60s went on, you just couldn't get it. The studios wanted to hold it. And now with home video and et cetera, every time a new media comes out, it's a new market for these old films.
And there will continue to be new media beyond YouTube. They might have glasses you buy that have 10,000 movies loaded in them. Mm-hmm. And you walk around, like a zombie. You think texting and driving is bad. What about watching movies while driving?
It's coming. It's coming. They're doing all kinds of...
But you know what, Frank? I think it's going to inevitably come back to the film house. People want to go out to a movie for a night's entertainment to get out of their cocoon and have a different environment. And I think the movie theater is going to survive centuries.
Well, I do. I agree with you, but there's one if I'd put in there. I do. My generation does. The younger generation, I don't know. They're used to a whole different style.
They want the holodeck. They want to go to the Star Trek holodeck and actually be in the movie, and you can pick the role you play.
All right. Well, there's going to be some really crummy acting in the future movies.
Well, no, because you basically, your consciousness goes into the character, and it's already what was pre-planned in that movie. Of course, there'll be alternate takes, because when they have these things in, about the, what do they call it, the supercomputers. Mm-hmm. They say that within 100 years, maybe within 50 years, the supercomputers are going to be so powerful that a virtual reality is a guaranteed thing. Mm-hmm. So that one scientist said the chances we're living in a virtual reality right now are about 95%.
All right.
Because our supercomputers, we're on the verge of that. Mm-hmm. So anything,
So would you say that the movie houses will change the screens, and the people will still go to them, but they'll be very different?
I can't say. Mm-hmm. I never would have predicted the internet. But I would think that people want exercise and they want their bodies moving, so they're not going to just sit in a cocoon like it's like some heroin addict, going off in La La Land. I think people are going to want to be mobile and live life. But they'll go into these holograms and be in a Hitchcock film with Frank Dello.
Now, see, that would make it interesting for the younger generation.
Frank will be doing the narrative over the movie, so he won't be in the movie. He's going to be doing the narratives.
Okay, and then if I'm in the movie, I won't be able to see it because I always feel like a fool when I see or hear myself.
Yeah, but John Forsythe didn't feel that way, and you're the John Forsythe of visual radio.
Did John Forsythe ever listen to himself?
I don't know. This is Charlie's Angels, right?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it does. It reminds me of Charlie's Angels.
Well, that's we got John Forsythe here.
That's right.
He's manipulating what I say.
Charlie.
I think he's gone, but
he is.
According to you can bring him back anyway.
Yep. Anything else on stage fright?
One thing, a few years, Marlene Dietrich's career as an actress, a film actress, I should say, is almost over. You can probably count on both hands the movies she will make for the rest of her life. But one of them is, when you read the plot summary, you read a one-paragraph plot summary, it has the same plot as this movie, and that is Stage Fright and Witness for the Prosecution.
Whoa.
Which is when you read it, you say, God, is it the same plot? And it's not when you watch it, but it's a very similar movie. And she has almost the same kind of role. And so I found that interesting. Jane Wyman was probably at her peak as an actress. She had won an Oscar 2 years earlier. And she had kind of a sharp arc. Television brought her back on Falcon's Crest, but she was, her film career didn't really take off. She had a niche and she was good in it, but that niche didn't last too long.
But she's Spock's mother, correct? Jane Wyman?
That's Jane Wyatt, isn't it?
Oh, I'm not sure. Okay. Probably right.
I think it's Jane Wyatt.
I'll have to look that up.
I know I'm going to lose a lot of any fans you have when I say this, but I was never a Trekkie. I've watched some shows. I can't recite the chapter and verse the way so many people can.
And I think Trekkie, and you heard me quote a little earlier, good old-fashioned hatred. How refreshing. That's verbatim. I like the word Trekkie. The Trekkers want to be called Trekkers. Why not be a Trekkie? Mm-hmm. They take an affront to being called Trekker or Trekkie.
Well,
Oh, I like being
in that case, I've affronted your listeners, but that's life. You can't choose the name that people call you. They're going to call you no matter what. Just give up and go with the flow.
Early for dinner. Hey, Frank, unless you've got anything else to say on this, it's been a great session here today.
Okay, I got one other thing to say. The first Robin Hood I remember was Richard Todd, who played Robin Hood in a Disney movie. And I saw all the Disney movies when I was a kid, and Richard Todd is the prime suspect in this movie, so he too is at his peak. He's a British actor that became known to Americans, but to me, he's the first Robin Hood I ever knew.
Excellent.
And Joe, I'll talk to you next week.
Thank you, Frank.
Okay, and what's the young lady's name that's there?
Jeanne.
Jeanne, thank you for being there too.
Oh, you're welcome. Bye-bye. See you next week.
Okay, bye-bye.
And movies, talking movies.
Yeah.
Isn't it a great component of this?
Unbelievable. The movies from the 30s and 40s, there's nothing like them.
Now, most public access stations have a movie night.